On August 2nd, 2022, before The Flash's release, DC's Batgirl was dramatically cancelled despite it being in its final stages of production. Supposedly, this was due to two reasons. The first was so that Warner Brothers could make a tax write-off, and no, Batgirl wasn't the only WB film that suffered this same fate. There was an animated holiday Scooby-Doo movie titled Scoob! Holiday Haunt that was cancelled for this same exact reason as well. The second reason was that WB genuinely felt like Batgirl was a terrible movie that would have hurt DC's brand. Unfortunately, Peter Safran, co-owner of DC Studios alongside James Gunn, still felt the same way about Batgirl after seeing it himself. In January 2023, he stated, "Batgirl's a character that inevitably we will include in our story. I saw the movie, and there are a lot of incredibly talented people in front of and behind the camera in that film, but that film was not releasable, and it happens sometimes. That film was not releasable." Now, amid Batgirl's unfortunate cancellation, we've had three separate DC movie releases: Black Adam, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and finally, The Flash. All three of these movies, which are movies that WB themselves clearly believed in, have failed one way or another. Black Adam lost millions at the box office and received terrible reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, meaning that movie never shifted the hierarchy of power in the DC universe whatsoever. Shazam! Fury of the Gods got terrible reviews and also bombed at the box office, just like Black Adam. After being touted as one of the best superhero movies ever made by a bunch of celebrities such as Tom Cruise and Stephen King before its release, The Flash is finding itself in an even more awkward situation than Black Adam and Shazam 2 because The Flash is performing even worse than Black Adam did at the box office. Now, I say all of this to ask what I feel is a very valid question after The Flash failed to live up to any of its PR hype, while considering WB ignored their fans' outcries to not release The Flash or to at least give The Flash an ending that recast the role due to the long list of terrible crimes committed by Ezra Miller. Was Batgirl really that bad or as unreleasable as Peter Safran said? What I'm about to say is going to sound incredibly harsh or unfair, but hear me out because I'm only saying it to make a point here. As DC fans, we're kind of used to mediocrity or DC putting out mixed to low tier products on the entertainment side of things, at least when you compare DC's output to Marvel's output this past decade. To give a few examples, the Arrowverse started with extremely high highs only for it to end with extremely low lows. The Snyderverse started with a ridiculous amount of hype for Man of Steel thanks to Henry Cavill taking on the role of Superman, only for the Snyderverse to come to a dramatic end due to things outside of Zack Snyder's control. The DCEU was in such a dire state post-Snyderverse era that even The Rock came in and tried to set things straight to bring a new level of hype to the DC cinematic universe with Black Adam, but even The Rock, who's arguably Hollywood's biggest star at this very moment, failed at trying to uplift the DC brand with all his star power. The only two recent cases where DC has found success with big budget movies are Zack Snyder's Justice League, a straight to streaming service release, and Matt Reeves' The Batman, DC's most successful movie on the big screen in an incredibly long time now. As wild as it is to say this, those two films do share something in common. They found success thanks to WB leaving those directors alone and allowing them to essentially bring their entire vision to life. I say all of this to point out a very specific but frustrating fun fact. The directors of this canceled Batgirl movie are the same folks who directed the top 2 rated episodes of Marvel's Miss Marvel Disney Plus show on IMDb, those episodes being 1 and 6. On top of that, these are the same folks who directed Bad Boys for Life, which is the 3rd highest grossing January release of all time. Regardless if Batgirl was in an unreleasable state or not when it had gotten cancelled, I genuinely think that WB missed out on what could have been a successful PR story. A straight to DVD and straight to streaming services movie getting genuinely good reviews, making a decent amount of money due to it being on a low budget, and being made by the same directors of Marvel's Miss Marvel TV show starring Leslie Grace and Brendan Fraser, who everybody loves, would have been an absolute much needed home run story for DC. Now, if you kept up with the rumors at the time, I'm sure you're thinking, what about the supposedly bad test screenings for Batgirl? Sure, you have a point here. Rumors did say that very early test screenings of Batgirl made the movie look like a TV pilot, which was clearly being said as a bad thing and was one of the reasons Batgirl got cancelled. But my inquiry of a counterpoint to that concern is, did Batgirl really need to be a massive big budget film or look like one for it to be successful or for it to get audiences interested in the film? Black Adam had a budget of $200 million, which is $10 million less than The Flash, despite it looking like the bigger budget movie, and that movie was about a superhero character almost no one in the casual audience cared about. What exactly was that movie's selling point? The Rock playing a super anti-hero character who's sort of kind of a hero at some point in the movie? Clearly that selling point wasn't good enough for audiences, despite its genuinely good visual effects and production quality. As for The Flash's only real selling point has always been Michael Keaton's long-awaited return as Batman, and that has been the case since the first set leaks, the first teaser trailer, and even the first set of posters for The Flash. Yet, The Flash still failed to live up to any of its hype, just like Black Adam, despite Michael Keaton's return being handled perfectly in the movie. Now, you know what Batgirl would have had going for it outside of Leslie Grace, who clearly loved playing Batgirl very much, and Brendan Fraser, who everybody adores for one reason or another? The simple fact that Batgirl took place in the one area that almost every DC fan loves, and the one place that DC has historically found success in on the big screen, Gotham City. Whether you're a hardcore DC fan or a casual fan who picks and chooses what DC related properties they watch, odds are you love Batman related DC projects, and you love Gotham City, a movie centered around Gotham City that finally reintroduces a member of the Bat family for the first time since she was introduced on Batman and Robin in 1997, would have easily garnered immediate interest regardless of its $90 million budget, just for the simple fact that it's a Bat-centric film. People love Batman. People love Gotham City. People clearly would have at least been interested in yet another Bat-centric film. If that wasn't enough to be a selling point, regardless if Batgirl's story was the most generic superhero origin story ever made or not, the movie also had something else in its pocket to garner people's interest. Michael Keaton's return. You know, the same thing that The Flash used for its entire marketing period as its #1 reason for you to see the movie. If you didn't know this, yes, Michael Keaton was going to reprise his role as Batman in Batgirl just like he did so in The Flash. While that sounds incredibly interesting, I do want to point out that rumors say that Keaton was only in the film for about 8 to 15 minutes in the few early test screenings of Batgirl. That could have changed during its final stage of production, but as far as we know, it seems like he wouldn't have had this massive presence in the movie. However, if the past Batman films and The Flash are anything to go by, I do think that using Michael Keaton's Batman as a mentor to Batgirl would have been a really compelling angle. That's exactly what Keaton's Batman did in The Flash, but imagine him coming to help Batgirl her lowest, teaching her legitimately good Bat-centric techniques, and ultimately giving her a massively upgraded costume before the climax of the film. That would have been a perfectly fitting arc for Keaton's Batman, since it would have taken place in the city that his Batman is far too familiar with, and it wouldn't have overshadowed Leslie's character at all. What would have worked even more for Batgirl, in my opinion, and this is going to require spoilers for The Flash for me to talk about, but whatever, is fitting this movie into the DCEU Elseworlds timeline. If Batgirl had to change the Keaton cameo due to his death in The Flash and instead replace him with George Clooney, who's canonically still Batman one way or another in one of the many DC timelines, that would have worked even more for this Batgirl film. A dormant Batman who isn't hindered by his trauma, as shown by Clooney's cameo in The Flash, and has some experience working with a previous Bat family years ago, giving advice to a down-on-her-luck Batgirl totally would have worked. Clooney's Batman is far more caring, endearing, and very warm as Bruce Wayne. He would clearly be capable of mentoring a modern-day Batgirl just getting started. I mean, come on, they could have easily made up some off-screen stories regarding his adventures with Batgirl, who's likely retired whenever this movie takes place. Just to remind you, we're talking about the same Batman who was able to convince Mr. Freeze to help him at the end of Batman and Robin. As much as I like Keaton's Batman being a mentor to both Barry Allens, and as much as I would have loved to see him mentor Batgirl, let's not all pretend like George Clooney couldn't have gotten the job done in this film with a short cameo. It would have been perfectly fine, and it's an easy fix that would make Batgirl far less confusing to viewers if it ever released onto Max, digital storefronts, or physical media. Outside of what's already been said, there's a genuinely good reason as to why this entire story of Batgirl gets cancelled because it's deemed unreleasable or not a big enough film to interest people, so that would have hurt DC's brand, only for the other 3 big budget films to do that instead still frustrates me so much. It's not just because it got canned in favor of 3 films that performed terribly at the box office and also happened to ironically and unironically hurt the brand regardless of WB trying to avoid that happening. It frustrates me because I think WB is miscalculating what DC films need to be for people to get interested in DC again. I personally don't think that WB needs to make big budget superhero films or shows that have massive stakes for people to care about them. People just want good DC movies and shows regardless of their stakes. That's what DC needs to make and continue to put out if they want people to care for the DC brand. WB needs to stop chasing these end-of-the-world big-budget superhero movies. The last several years, or at least The Flash most recently, have taught us that DC chasing this has been a massive misstep. The same clearly applies to Black Adam, Shazam 2, and supposedly Aquaman 2, which insiders have said is also yet another upcoming disaster of a film for DC on Twitter. This canceled Batgirl movie, on the other hand, seems to be a potentially missed opportunity that would have probably been the easiest win for DC in years. While choosing to talk about this canceled Batgirl movie now feels incredibly out of the blue, it's rapidly beginning to become a topic of discussion again after The Flash's poor performance at the box office. And you know, I get it. I agree with the folks who think DC should reconsider releasing the film again one way or another. We were promised that The Flash was the greatest superhero movie ever made, or at least one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. Sure, it was a good superhero team-up crossover movie, but it was nothing close to being one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. So, I'm sorry if I sound skeptical, but I kind of refuse to buy into the whole "this film was unreleasable" narrative. That just doesn't sound realistic at all. I refuse to believe that this film was either worse or on the same tier as Fantastic Four 2015, Catwoman, Green Lantern, or the rest of the worst superhero movies ever made. Even if that was the case, even if Batgirl's early cuts were rough, WB could have at least put out the best teaser trailer possible to see the reactions or interest level from the DC fanbase before canceling it. That way, if the fanbase reacted to the teaser trailer positively, they could have been like, okay, so this is worth saving after all internally, regardless if it still went straight to Max, digital storefronts, and an eventual physical release. If the DC fanbase reacted negatively, at least it would have been justified in canceling it after all. In my eyes, Batgirl was probably a missed opportunity. I refuse to believe that it was any worse than any of the last 3 DC movies that failed to live up to every single one of their expectations. I'm not saying that Batgirl would have lived up to its expectations, nor am I saying that Batgirl would have been the best superhero movie ever made. What I'm trying to say though is that I at least believe that Batgirl deserved to be released. It deserves to see the light of day. Not only for the sake of bringing the character back into the pop culture fandom, but for the sake of DC fans, those involved with the film, and for the DC brand who's arguably hurt even more than it was before Batgirl's cancellation. Release Batgirl, WB.